Okay, I think we've managed to get everyone in as well. So just a quick hello and welcome to everyone on this talk on investigative journalism. We'll just do a quick round of introduction. So my name's Chris Cho, and I'm a trustee here at the SPA. And in a second, I'm going to hand over to Michele Thiel, who's a freelance investigative journalist and reporter at My London. And she's going to be talking about all things investigative journalism. So over to you, Michele.
Hi, thank you. This is super exciting because a couple of years ago, I was on the other side listening to people speak to me about it. Yeah, just a bit about like my background is that I studied investigative journalism at City University and graduated last summer, and then since then have freelanced and done, small investigations for at my staff writer job with My London. So I've got a little presentation that I'm going to share. If I figure out how to do this, 1 second, and then I'm just going to talk through kind of just very quick rundown, and then we'll have some time for questions. And also what I really like as well, if anyone has an investigative idea that you would like to do at uni and you're kind of unsure of how you want to do that, please like bring that forward later, and like we can kind of workshop it a little bit, like very speed fire, because I think that's like a really fun way of doing it. So just checking, can everyone see this? Just thumbs up, everyone good, cool, perfect. So investigative journalism, the basics. So the first thing in investigative journalism is an idea. There is nothing without an idea. And investigations differ from general news in that news, you're just reporting on something that's happened. It's very reactive, it's very fast. Like there was a stabbing the other day in London, and so you've got to be there on scene, talking to the police, talking to witnesses, and you've got to get the information out as quick as possible. You're not commenting on anything. There's not necessarily someone at fault or in the wrong. Obviously, if it's a stabbing, it's, there is a person who committed that crime, but you're not revealing something that's hidden. You're not kind of holding anyone to account specifically. You're just saying these are the facts and this is what happened. Investigations, you have elements of that, but you're really holding someone to account. There is usually, the way I see it is like there's usually someone, big, a big corporation, the government, something like that, that you're holding them to account, because usually there is no one holding them to account, and that's your job as an investigative journalist. And you're finding out something important and you're showing it. It's got to be revelatory. So it has to be in the public interest. It has to be something new. You can build on previous investigations that have occurred, but you have to be bringing something new to the table. And you've got to be like looking at if there's, been like mischief, if there's been corruption, if there's been lies, if there's been misuse of public funds, are they saying they're going to do so? For instance, with universities, are the universities telling students they're going to do one thing and then completely doing the opposite? That is interesting. That is investigative. If you can figure out the proof and get sources and witnesses to come together for that idea, then it makes an amazing story. Okay, some common mistakes that you can make in investigative journalism is by campaigning. We're journalists and we care about topics, we care about issues, we all individually have opinions and politics. But the point of an investigative story is not to campaign for a cause. We're not activists. We are there to investigate something that and reveal something that activists and politicians later can use to make change. But that's not our specific job. And we're not advocating, we are advocating for people who don't have a voice, but we're not advocating on their behalf, because you can't take everyone's ideas like at face value or voices at face value. Have a clear eye when you're listening to people's stories, and be cynical essentially, because some people might be telling the truth, some people might not. And if you let that kind of like advocating, if you're looking at someone with like so much sympathy and you kind of feel like, oh, I really need to help this person, it might cloud your judgment as to whether they are trustworthy as a source. Awareness raising. We can raise awareness for an issue, but that is not the main point of an investigative story. obviously there would be an issue, but what is the story behind it? That is the most important thing. Why is it happening? Who is doing it? You know, obviously when we were kids, we learned the kind of five W's or whatever. Like that is basically the beginning of every investigative story. Cool. So a little bit of where do investigative ideas come from? Press releases. Great ways of, if you look through press releases, you'll find little nuggets and tidbits where you're like, that might lead to an investigative idea, or that sounds interesting, let me look into it more. Government documents. The government has to release like, you know, their like money and like their funds and like policy statements and all of that stuff. Read through them. There might be something interesting there. There might be something that makes you think of an idea. Company accounts. So there's a website called Companies House, beta.companieshouse.gov.uk. You can search up any company registered in the UK and you can look through their public accounts for the past however many years that they've been registered. Newspapers. What a great thing that we did at City was we would take that day's newspaper and we would systematically scan it and read through everything, and then you'd highlight like something interesting that is like, this is being reported on as a news story, but how can it be changed into an investigative story? What is it missing? Is it missing something important? You know, is the news story part of a bigger issue? People, great. Obviously, you know, lawyers are really great sources of information. Friends, contacts, like anyone you know. Like you might be having a conversation with a friend, and I'm sure you've heard this about just general journalism, but investigative ideas work the same. You know, your friend might have gone to the hospital and they were discriminated against by the nurse. That is a story. It's not happened to you, but you can take that from your friend complaining to you and saying, oh, it was a really horrible experience, and you can turn that into an investigative story. Open and closed source information, I'll go into more of that. And then obviously yourself, your own knowledge, your own access, like, you know, are you in a position where you can find something interesting or you see something? Have you spotted a pattern in some data from any of those places that I was telling you about before? That's where you can get a story from. Now, how do you go about investigating an idea? Story-based inquiry is kind of the like main thing. It's a term coined by Lee Hunter, and it is basically you know, start with a story and you start with a thesis, your initial idea. And then what you do is you verify or falsify it. You have to search for evidence that either supports or undermines it. If the evidence you find in the initial stages verifies your thesis, then you continue. You find more and more evidence, you find proof, and you continue finding that idea, that story. If the evidence you find undermines your idea, as in that your idea doesn't work, then look at the evidence being given and see how whether you can get another idea out of it, I guess. Don't try to like, you know, fit obviously the evidence to your idea, because that's not how it works. You can change your idea, you change your perspective based on what you found. And what you have to ask is your idea wrong? Or do you just not understand the evidence being given to you? Is there another way of looking at the evidence that does support your idea? And yeah, and it's great as well in this kind of stages to get other people to look at it as well, kind of see if they are seeing the same thing you are in the data. Visualizing it is a great way, you know, write out every single thing you know about a story in a Word document, in a Google Doc, on a piece of paper, like, just so you can see it in a clear mind, everything that you have, and then what you're missing. You know, I quite like kind of like a timeline. You can see where the gaps are in the information and where you need to find more. Obviously, you can use mind map, post-it notes, flowchart, and then you can use like desk-based research, social media, books, like, you know, other newspaper articles to kind of get background research on it, and then go further and then talk to experts or other journalists who might have reported on the same thing, witnesses, participants, victims, and then you can move forward with closed source material. Questions to ask. What is your ideal top line? Okay, what is, like, if you could write this story tomorrow and it was the perfect investigative story, what is the headline that would be splashed across the front page and it would be amazing? And then what is your most likely top line? What can you actually prove based on what you found? Because those two are not the same things. And then what is your fallback if that proof doesn't work out? who is being held accountable? Is it worth the effort? Because listen, investigative journalism is very hard and it takes a really long time. And you have to wonder sometimes if actually investigating the story, is it important enough to you? Now, as students, of course, like, you might have a bit more time to kind of investigate stories relating to your university or your local towns. And, you might have a bigger team of doing it, and that's great. But just freelancing as an investigative journalist, the kind of rate that you might get often is maybe not actually like worth the kind of time and effort that you actually put into it. So it is something to consider. And remember to keep honest and challenge yourself, and don't let go of your conscience because of the evidence presented to you. Like, whatever the evidence says, you have to take it, and you shouldn't try to like change it or change who you are based on it, if that makes sense. Open source information, I'm just going to run through this really quickly. So open source information is anything publicly available to you. So I was saying earlier, press releases, government data, articles, social media, charities, all of that. There's a website called OSINT. I don't know what it stands for, but it's basically a framework which links to like various databases that you can use. It's amazing. You can literally find almost anything on there. It's very creepy. But so OSINT is great. You should definitely have a look at it. Like, you can find like Reddit, you can find information about politicians, MPs, all of that kind of stuff. I honestly haven't even used it to its full extent, but it's fascinating. And then closed source information is FOIs, interviewees, undercover work, because closed source information is exclusive to you. It's not just publicly available that any other journalist can find it. FOIs, actually, no, I'm going to do going undercover first. Going undercover is a very like specific form of investigative journalism that kind of doesn't really happen anymore. It mostly happens if you're maybe working on BBC Panorama or Channel 4 dispatches, and other than that, doesn't really do it. No one does it that much anymore. And if they are like backed by big media organizations like the BBC, like Channel 4, Telegraph, Guardian. Don't do it unless you are backed by a big media organization, because there are a lot of legal ramifications and there are safety ramifications for you personally while you're there. As a student, don't go undercover. I mean, I kind of did once, like accidentally. I pretended to go on a accommodation tour to figure out how many people were living at the accommodation at my uni, and then I was super paranoid that the person that gave me that tour would see me around uni and be like, wait, didn't you say you were a prospective student? So basically don't do it, but that was quite funny. And yeah, if you do it, again, with the support of BBC, Channel 4, that kind of stuff, you have to be very careful. You have to hide your social media. You can't be very public, and it is an interesting way of getting information. And there were people in my investigative journalism course who did do it. Actually, one of them did it for ITV, I believe, went undercover in like a boxing gym. It was very cool. But yeah, like I said, be careful. FOIs, this is my favorite part. I love FOIs. Freedom of Information Act. It came into law in 2000. Anyone can submit a request for information to any and all public authorities. You don't have to be a journalist to do that. So like just any random person can do it. Public authorities include the police, NHS trusts, schools, Home Office, any government institution, universities, student unions. You can't FOI, but that's because they're a charity usually. And under the law, you would receive a response and hopefully information within 20 working days. They are such a great way of getting information. When you submit a request, you should receive an acknowledgement that your request is being processed within a couple of days. And the 20 working day deadline starts from the date of the acknowledgement. And like I said, working days, so it doesn't count weekends or bank holidays. And when the 20 days are up, like mark it in your calendar when the 20 days are up, and then you chase them for a response immediately. You say, hello, today is the deadline. I would like my information, please, because they will like kind of walk all over you if you don't like actually chase it up. They will just leave it in the ether forever. There are a number of exemptions that authorities can use to refuse to give you information. And You can appeal exemptions if you wish by requesting internal review, but that's not really necessary for you guys as uni students. Uni students, you can FOI your uni. You can send an email to your press office or your FOI email if they have a dedicated one. Most unis do. And you can just say, hi, my name is this. I am seeking information about this under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. I do have an example actually. Here, this is an example of a request I submitted for an investigation I did for Vice about transgender healthcare. So, dear whoever, this is a request for information. I would like to request the following. And then I did it in like numbers or bullet points, just so that it's very clear and there's no kind of room for, interpretation. And then I say, please provide the information in either Excel or Word. Excel is usually better for data, but yeah. And then you say, if there's a need for further clarification, let me know as soon as you can, because again, the time limit pauses during the clarifying process. And then you say, I look forward to receiving your response within 20 working days. And that's it. And this is the acknowledgement. So they say, dear Ms. Thiel, thank you for your request. We're dealing with this, yours sincerely. And they usually give you a reference number. So keep that on hand, keep that in your email, just so you know that. And then they can decline to answer, citing a specific exemption. There are lots of exemptions in the FOI Act. I don't know them all. So they've asked, could you clarify? And then they've also said, oh, we're refusing to give this financial information under this exemption. And then I appealed it, basically. And I searched through old FOI cases that were brought up to the Information Commissioner's office and tried to set a precedent for why in the past when information was released, and made a case for the public interest where this information was necessary for whatever it was. And then again, there's an appeal acknowledgement. And then I lost my internal review appeal, but I could have taken up to the Information Commissioner's office if I wish, but at the time I didn't have the time or money really to do it. Anyway, so you do FOIs, you do an FOI, you get your data back. Amazing, it's an amazing feeling. And then you've got to do some data analysis, which I feel like most of us, as journalists, most of us are like humanities students. So numbers, not really our vibes. Trust me, I don't do numbers, but it is so helpful to do data analysis. It's so amazing. And you just find the most amazing information and great stats that you can pepper in your investigative pieces that really stick out in people's minds. Excel is your friend. Great way to analyze data, even if you have no idea what to do, because it's very intuitive and easy to use. There are also massive amount of YouTube tutorials and whatever to kind of teach you what to do. But I'm sure most of us did like Excel, basic Excel during like GCSE or something. And so honestly, that is enough. That's all I know, and it's fine. You can spot patterns in data, you can filter it, filter into percentages, filter it into specific numbers, put it into graphs. And percentages are the bread and butter of investigative stories. Like I said, they flash really great stats during your stories and they stick in people's minds. People might not remember so and so said this, or they might not remember the source's specific name, but they'll remember the source related to 10% of funding or something. I don't know. So as you can see, this is an example of one of my spreadsheets. Here's my government funding on the left. It's very messy. There's my gender identity clinic funding in the middle. And then I've done just easy percentages. Very simple. But then I can say, the majority of them have less than 1% of funding, which is a very low number. And yeah, I think that is what I said. It's a great stat. And then you can present your data. Again, great way of like sticking in people's mind. People like multimedia, people like visual elements. And again, no one really likes maths unless you study maths. So graphs are great because you can just see it very easily. Excel, you can make graphs in Excel, or there is a website called Flourish, which is free, and they do amazing graphs. They do like interactive graphs as well that you can like embed. You can do like a London map graph with like, for instance, the London mayoral election polling data, if you wanted to. It's really interesting. Maybe I'll show it to you in a minute. Anyway, it's great ways of presenting your data in a really easy to digest format. And yeah, like I said, it'll keep readers engaged, it'll stick in their mind. And so here's an example. This is just a screenshot, but this is interactive, this graph that I did. So like it starts there and then it kind of moves, and you can see that like funding goes down and wait time goes up. It's great correlation, right? Sources, best part of investigative story too. Where do you find sources? People that have already been interviewed in articles about similar topics. Like, and that is also, sorry, I forgot to say this, but one of the first things you should do when you have an idea is Google it and make sure there's no one has really done it. That is something new, right? Like I said, it has to be new, it has to be revelatory. So when you do that, you can find also like similar reporting. If it's not specifically your idea, there's not been a long form investigation about it, you know, kind of comprehensive, then yeah, go for it. And then there might have been news stories, you know, about that situation. For instance, I did an investigation about transgender healthcare in Northern Ireland. Now, that is not necessarily a new topic, but I had new information to present. And so I Googled it, and then I found reporting from the Belfast Telegraph from 2 years ago that wrote about it. So I looked at that and then I was like, oh, this is interesting. This person was interviewed. Let me see if I can contact them for another interview. They might have more to say, new things to say now. And yeah, you can find sources very easily like that. You can also find experts on that specific thing. So I also, people on social media, journal requests. I'm sure many of you probably have seen on Twitter, Facebook groups. Uni Facebook groups are also really great at finding sources because there's just such a wide variety of people there. And you know, you can just say, hi, I'm a journalist. I'm looking to speak to a trans person from Northern Ireland. Great. Journal requests. It's wonderful. And people will contact you. You can also find, like, I have, you know, trawled through social media before, kind of just searching keywords like transgender, Northern Ireland, whatever it might have been. And then people I see that are tweeting about it, you know, I look through their profile, I'm like, okay, cool. This person is in their bio, it says they're trans and they're tweeting a lot about it. And it says they're from Northern Ireland. I'm going to DM them, see if they would be interested in talking to me. Yeah, you got to like shoot your shot a bit. Yeah, and then friends of friends, obviously, like if you have friends who have experienced it and like their friends, you know, tell them to put the word out, tell them to retweet your tweets, that kind of thing. This is a quote from my lecturer at City. He's the head of investigative journalism at City. He said, quotes are the lifeblood of a story. They bring energy and vitality, especially in investigations. So remember that sources are literally everything, because data is great. Data is your evidence, data is your proof. And, you know, like I said, stats are great, but people like to relate to someone. They like to feel sympathy, they like to feel empathy, you know, and if they're reading about a person who is, you know, heartbroken, who is trigger warning, who might want to commit suicide because they can't get the healthcare that they need as a trans person, you know, that will tug at their heartstrings. And, you know, they like to hear from the person themselves, essentially. You know, they don't want you as a faceless journalist kind of describing things to them. They want to bold quotes, you know, I wanted to do this, like said, whatever. And yeah, quotes are great. So yeah. Why do investigations need sources? To give credibility to your story, because the fact that it's happening to actual people, to provide a human element. All stories are about people at the end of the day. You know, we are all people bumbling through this earth. We're just trying to make it through. And we like reading about other people. And yeah, like I said, a reader will remember the people the issue affects. They might remember the statistics, but it won't be the main thing. They'll think of, you know, this one person that they read about that had this experience, and then they might think, oh yeah, and 10% of funding or whatever. Yeah, actually, just someone the other day asked me if I knew the statistics of missing people in London separated by race. And I said no. He was like, do you know the names of them? And I was like, well, not all of them, because there are a lot. But there are some names that stick in my brain. Richard Okorei recently, obviously, is a big name that has stuck in my brain. He was the Black man with sickle cell disease who died in Epping Forest. You know, and so names matter more than numbers, I guess. People matter. Contacting sources, like I said, social media, great. You can send messages to people. When you're interviewing them, it's ideal to get them to meet you in person. COVID permitting, of course, we can't, you know, it's a bit iffy right now. Or speak on the phone if you can, or like on Zoom, because at least then you can like kind of have a conversation and talk through things. And when you're interviewing someone, I'm sure you know or have tried this, they will say something that you might not necessarily have thought of a question about, but then you'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. I should follow up on that. It might not have been in my original plan of questions to ask, but I should follow up on that. Whereas when you're like emailing someone or, you know, writing it on a social media message saying, can I send you questions? You know, those are the only questions, and they will answer to those questions only. And there's kind of no room for like the extra interesting bits, which is what makes interviews so great. If you've ever read a really great celebrity interview, it's always like the little bits that are like more interesting, that make the person seem more human, less of a celebrity. Do you know what I mean? And it's the same when you're interviewing sources for investigative stories. You know, you want them to kind of, it sounds bad, but I mean, like, let their guard down a bit, you know, and talk to you, and like, you know, you want them to kind of tell you these kind of, and usually it's very like deep and personal details, and you have to make them feel comfortable to tell you these deep and personal things that then you are going to report on in a, you know, in a forum that a lot of people are going to read, and you have to make them feel comfortable like to tell you about that kind of stuff. So yeah, in person or on Zoom on the phone is like the best way to interview people, in my opinion. And in person is great as well, because, you know, you can be like, oh, let's meet a cafe, let me buy you a coffee, like, you know, it's quite nice, and like you feel a bit like you're friends. But also, yeah, hang on, interview preparation. Identify what you're after when you interview a source. Firstly, obviously, have notes, have questions, and research extensively on whatever the topic is that you're asking them about, because it's easier to get someone to tell you something you already know. And I have a great, really stupid example about this. You know, when like someone, oh, you know, when someone's like got like there's gossip about something. Not that gossip is a good thing. You know, your friend's like, oh, I can't tell you about it. And you're like, oh no, I already know. And they're like, oh, okay, well then I can talk to you about it because you already knew about it. Like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It really is. If you kind of already know what you're wanting to get out of the source, they're more likely to tell you rather than feeling like they're like telling you a secret. And it's also a really good tool to assess whether someone's trustworthy. Also, I'm loving that Chris is just laughing at me. Thank you. A good tool to assess whether someone's
I was just saying, I really like that. That's just brilliant.
Thank you. I thought it was a great analogy. Yeah, it's a really good tool to assess whether someone's trustworthy, because if you kind of already know and you like know the background information, what they're telling you, it won't be surprising. It will just be an addition to it. And then you can also know whether they're lying to you, right? Because you're like, what you're saying doesn't track with what I've found out. And then maybe they're not a good and trustworthy source. Never underestimate the power of flattery, you know, just be really nice, be really friendly, say, oh, wow, I love your shoes. Like when you meet them, like, it's nice. It puts people off guard, you know, makes them feel more comfortable, makes them feel, again, like you're their friend. And you should talk to them as if they're your friend, but remember that you are not their friend. It's a very strange line to balance, but you know, you should act as if you are just having a chat, having a good conversation, but remember that they're not your friend. You are trying to get information out of them. They are a source at the end of the day. Find a shared interest, you know, if it's football, I don't know, talk about Arsenal, Celtic, I don't know, football, but yeah. Ask open questions, of course. You know, try not to do yes or no questions. ask very like, tell me more about that. Please, can you explain more about this? And yeah, let the conversation run. Don't rush to fill silence if they're like, thinking, or if they're being quiet. Just sit and wait. And I know it's our like natural human instinct to like fill silence, but try to prevent that. And then active listening, nodding and saying yes, yeah. Again, it makes people feel more comfortable. It makes people feel like they're, saying something important, which they probably are if you're investigating something. Right to replies. So this is kind of like you've done all of this work, you've done all of this legwork for an investigative story, and even as a uni student, as a student journalist, I don't like that term, but working at a student paper, you need to do a right to reply. It is a fundamental code of ethics within journalism and legal. And you have to put your allegations to the person you're accusing of wrongdoing and allow them time to respond. And they are entitled to a defense, just like in court. There's no specific time frame about this. No one has said there is a specific time, but it's usually between 24 and 48 hours, or it can be up to a week if the allegations are more complex. Let's say if it was like, a long list of sexual assault allegations, you might take more time with that. If they respond before your deadline with any comment, you must publish it in full. You can't like edit it or anyway. And if they don't respond in time, you can go to print without comment or online without comment, and then you can update your online thing later when you receive the comment. If they decline to comment or don't respond at all, you just say that. And yeah, so, if you're investigating something to do with your uni, let's say the University of Bristol, you have to say to the University of Bristol, hi, I've got these allegations that that your security guards kicked a student out of their accommodation and beat the shit out of them. I don't know, I'm just making this up. This is what I've, like, these are my allegations. I have credible sources, I have credible evidence. What is your response? You have until tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. to respond. Don't send it on a weekend, obviously, weekdays. And then they can choose to respond. They can say, we have no knowledge of this incident, but we condemn any form of violence towards our students. We care so much about our students, blah, 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 blah. And then you publish that and you say, a spokesperson for the University of Bristol said, etc. And yeah, you have to give them a right to reply even as a student paper, because you can get in lots of trouble for that. I had to give a right to reply to the principal of my uni when we were investigating him for sexism. And he didn't respond to us, and then we could just hear him stalking the halls of the SU towards the media office, and we were like, great, super fun. Structuring a story. Inverted triangle. I'm sure you all know about this. Most of the news will have the info at the top, then you have important details, then you have general info. That is the general thing. In an investigative story, it kind of depends on who you're writing it for. Different publications have different styles. This one I wrote for, I did it in the style of BuzzFeed investigations, it's more narrative, it's more flowing, it's less of the inverted triangle. So, it's quite like, how much would you risk to be yourself? For Jamie, a now 22-year-old trans woman. That's how I think of it in my head. It's more kind of lyrical. So yeah, it depends on the place you're writing for. There is not really a wrong way, but do make sure, like, even though I did this very kind of narrative, flowy, lyrical thing, I still had the most important information at the top, which is my freedom of information request. The data should be at the top, and then you follow through with, and this source had this experience, which, is evidenced by the data. So yeah. Final thoughts. This is from a Channel 4 investigative journalist. She said, investigations are hard work. You're calling people all the time, emailing them, pushing them to respond to you. You have to be relentless and hit the ground running. These are my final thoughts. Keep records, time and date, everything. Take notes on literally everything. Make sure you have a folder, because you will lose things. You will lose things in the depths of your computer, and it will be very confusing when you have to write it up. Follow up every conversation with an email. If you've talked to an expert, talked to a source, just message them, email them, say, hey, thank you so much for speaking to me. Really appreciate everything. If you have any other thoughts, let me know. I'll send you like a link to the piece when it's up. Like, it's a really nice thing. It's nice to build relationships, keep those contacts as well, because they might help you in future. Record everything if you obviously are allowed to record in those situations. Fact check everything you read it here. Don't take anything at face value, and trust your instincts, because that's the main thing that you need to do as a journalist. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
I hope that was okay. Thank
Michele.
you.
No, that was great. Thanks very much for that as well. And I suppose the thing that I just wanted to check with you on this as well, though, is that rather than me going through a few of the questions that I had as well, though, I think at the start of the talk you mentioned, possibly just going over some ideas with the group here as well, though, and maybe just turning it into a bit of a mini workshop if that works as well. Though. So just for everyone that might have joined afterwards as well, Michele suggested that as a group, you can tell us about some of the ideas, investigative ideas that you've had, and we can just talk through them, in a kind of like a mini workshop format, if that works. So, either open up your camera and mic, or we can have a look at it in the text chat.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Or even in reactions, you can just put your hand up. We don't mind.
Yeah, please hit me with your ideas. I love hearing ideas. And by the way, this is a safe space. No one here is stealing anyone else's ideas or anything like that. Please feel free and comfortable to speak your ideas. Otherwise, I will fight you. So, I mean, like, if you steal an idea, I will fight you. So, sorry, I'm joking. But yeah, it's a safe space, guys. Oh, a person. Phoebe?
Hi, Phoebe.
Yeah, I don't do a journalism degree or anything, but it's something that I'm like looking at getting into and stuff like that. And something that I've kind of like spoken about before, like one day looking into would be something about the UK immigration system, because I feel a lot of us, I'm more familiar with the American system with like 90 Day Fiance and stuff like that than the UK immigration system, apart from maybe like the sort of trashy TV ones, like I can't remember what it's called. It's like Can't Pay, Take It Away, but it's like UK Border Force. It's like that kind of stuff. So that's sort of the only thing. So that's something that, I mean, maybe we could like talk about. That's quite like a high level thing to start looking at. That's what I've always thought. So like, how do you reckon that you go about doing something like that?
Yeah, like you said, it's a very broad topic, as a thing. So I'm sure you've had this before, like topics and like, a broad general topic is not necessarily an article idea. So you kind of have to pinpoint what specifically about the immigration system you would like to investigate or look into. Is it, about asylum seekers? Is it about detention centers for asylum seekers? The pinpoint specifically where it is, I would say do a lot of research, do a lot of reading into that. The fact that you're interested in it is great. I would really recommend the book Hostile Environment by Maya Goodfellow. It's amazing. Well, sad, but amazing. And yeah, and then once you've kind of pinpointed that, then you can start looking specifically at how to do that. Off the top of my head, because the UK immigration policy and the system is government run, all of that information will be public. So you can find those policies easily on and like find the updates to the policies and when they change and under what governments and all of that. And then you can, for instance, FOI the Home Office for the immigration data. I think they publish it sometimes anyway. But if you wanted more specific information, let's say divided by race, divided by age, divided by gender, you can FOI for that. And that could be a starting point for your information, for your story. You could do that and then look at the information and say, okay, so my idea originally is about asylum seekers in detention centers. Looking at this data, I see that there is an overwhelming number of women from the ages of 18 and 25 in those detention centers. Why is that? Why is that? Obviously, I'm making this up, but why is that happening? You know, who can I talk to about it? Can you find immigration experts or charities, you know, people who work, like immigration lawyers who work with those people in the asylum centers, who see these women? Why are they doing that? Why are there such a large majority? What is it? And then you can look at maybe the foreign influences, like what countries are those people from? Is there an overwhelming proportion of women from there? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's about kind of building and building and building and asking all these questions.
A quick question about that, like, which I'm sure like is in general as well. If you found that like most of the sources that you need to go to sort of like build down in the triangle are like high, not necessarily like high level things, but people that, I mean, I've like sent emails to people asking for things before, not like journalism wise, and just got no reply because I'm like, well, really, who am I? Like, I'm just someone sending an email. They probably get hundreds. Like, how do you think that it gets to a point where if at that level you're not getting any responses, you just have to write it off and go, I'm obviously not the right person to be looking into this because I can't get through that sort of like first barrier of even a response, because you can't just put this person refused comment, this person refused comment, this person refused comment, and then move on with it.
I understand what you mean. It is very easy to feel like it is this massive barrier. And I've been there. Like I'm doing a project right now where I have like 2 sources and I need more, and I'm just like stressed about it, you know. But I keep going. I think keep going. And I think the further you get in your career, the easier it will be, because like it's very hard as a student journalist. Trust me, I was there. I tried to do stuff back in the day, and during uni as well, and no one really wants to help you because they're like, oh, you're a student, I don't care. When it's so bad, but when they see like, oh, I'm writing this article for Vice, I'm writing this for BBC, like then they will want to talk to you. Do you know what I mean? Which is really stupid, but I would say just keep trying. There's a million people who will have at least something to say about that. Like, you know, it might not have been the specific source that you were looking for, like an immigration expert who is like the renowned immigration expert, but there will be other immigration experts in this country that might be a little bit smaller, and they still have the same interesting, relevant information to say, but they just haven't been interviewed by every media outlet ever. So keep going and keep trying, keep emailing, you know, keep following up with the emails. If they have a phone number, try to call them, because it's much harder to dodge on the phone. And that is a very key tenet of journalism, isn't it? You know, try to call their office, it's a bit harder in COVID, but as we're opening up again, try to call them and just say, hi, like, my name is Phoebe. I am writing this article. You don't have to say you're a student. You don't have to say that you're writing for a student paper. Like, they don't need to know that information. You are a journalist. That is my fundamental belief, is that student journalists are journalists. So say that. Hi, I'm a journalist writing an article about UK immigration. I would like to speak to you about this, this, and this. Do you have time to speak later this week or now? You know, just be very hot, like firm about it, and like don't let people walk over you just because you're a girl or you're a student or, you know, you're not working for the BBC. It doesn't matter. Like, trust me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks very much, Phoebe. I'm just having a quick look through the messages, and Kieran's asked a question as well, Michele. He said, what's the best way to network and build contacts with lawyers? So far, found charities and organizations have been the easiest to begin a dialogue with. So what's the best way to network and build contacts with lawyers?
Well, I mean, you're at uni now, right? There must be a law school. Make friends with the law students. I know that sounds really stupid, but like, as you well know, like even people that you're tangentially like connected with at uni are very helpful later in life. So make friends with law students, add them on Facebook, add them on Instagram, add them on LinkedIn. You know, and then you can also you can just go on LinkedIn and like find a law firm, and just like, because you can like find a company and then you can find like the employees of it, message people. Honestly, be brave, be bold. The worst people can do is ignore you or just say no, F off. Like, just message people on LinkedIn. So yeah, if you have law students at your school, if you know someone, if you have a friend who might be going to law, you know, ask them about their law school friends, you know, or the people that they might meet in pupillage or whatever it is, I can't remember. You know, those are really great ways. yeah, charities and organizations like that are really great as well, because they probably have lawyers or they know lawyers, and then they can put you in touch. It's really just kind of like feeding it down, I guess. And yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, also I worked for the Law Society for a bit, so I have a bit of a different experience where like I know lawyers from working there. But yeah, if you like, honestly, anyone you tangentially know who might be going into law, I have people who I have not spoken to in like 4 years. I have them on LinkedIn, and they are going to law school like next year, and I'm like, one day I'm going to message you and need you for something, and be brave, be bold, like, you know, just be like, hi, do you remember me? We sat together once in the cafe in 3rd year. I was wondering if you could help me, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, that's basically what I would say.
Right. Thanks very much to Kieran for that question as well. I'm just mindful of time here as well, though. So I'm going to rattle through a few of the questions, and it's going to be like one of those 1 minute round things. So apologies for that, Michelle. But I'm just going to quickly just scan through. So we've got Brooke. Hi, Brooke, who's asked, you mentioned investigative is usually about pinpointing wrongdoing and demonstrating in compiled evidence. Is there a subgenre that deals specifically with solutions or problem solving?
You can, yeah. It's not really not really the investigative journalism that like we were taught at City, but that doesn't mean it's like wrong. And yeah, like you can, if you have, there's a lot of focus now on like solutions-based journalism. So if you have investigative ideas that then have solutions-based focus on it, then yeah, absolutely go for it. You can do that.
Like that, didn't even have to time me for that. Very good. There was another mention as well, though. What about a resource such as LinkedIn for journalists? What can we do with that in terms of investigative journalism?
Sorry, wait, what? I'm trying to look at which question it is. LinkedIn.
Oh no, it was just something that I jotted down whilst you were talking as well.
Okay.
So, in terms of kind of like LinkedIn for journalists, is that a resource that could be used for investigative journalism?
Yeah, 100%. Because you can find people really easily on LinkedIn. You can find like people in companies like that. That is a very difficult thing. Is like you can't FOI or like investigate companies the same way that you would a public authority. But you can find people like on there. You can find people who don't work there anymore, and ask them like, you can find people who don't work there anymore and ask them like, hey, like, do you have any information about this thing that I've heard about this company? Like, honestly, message them. And like there's a lot of filters and stuff on LinkedIn that you can like use really easily. It's kind of a very great stalking tool. It's problematic, but yeah, I would say that like I personally think that like Twitter is a very great like, you know, connection of like journalists and stuff like that. But within investigative journalism, like all social media is so helpful for investigative journalism. Like, do not discount any single social media. Reddit, amazing. Twitter, amazing. Facebook, I know it's a bit dead, but trust me, Facebook groups, like local Facebook groups, are the most amazing thing ever. And yeah, LinkedIn, that you can find people easily. If you're looking for a specific person for a specific charity that you would like to talk to, find them on LinkedIn. It's great.
Thank you. And got one here from Lucy Dunn, who says, how do you draw the line between being firm with contacting potential sources and effectively outright harassment? Says she's working on a few investigative pieces just now, but it's feeling like, you know, she's annoying someone and having difficulty figuring out where that boundary is.
That's fair. And that's really great that you're working on investigative pieces, Lucy. Yeah, it is, again, a fine line to draw with the boundary. I have a like 3 rule minimum, and I have that for editors too. So I pitch once to editors, and then I follow up once more, and then I follow up a final time, and that's my limit. And because I'm not gonna keep harassing you and like keep emailing you. And I have the same with sources. I message them once. If they don't reply, I'll message again and be like, hi, just following up on this, like would really love to speak to you. If they don't reply again, I'll follow up a final time, and then that's it. Then I don't bother them anymore, and I move on to someone else. Because I think 3 messages and over the course of like 2 weeks, like not like 2 days. 3 messages over the course of like, a week or 2, I think is like an all right amount of messages to send and to get, personally. And it's not like you're not harassing them, you're just following up. And then after that final time, it's like, okay, it's been 3 times. Clearly they're not interested. Clearly they're not going to reply. I'm going to move on to someone else, because then it becomes a bit like, guys. But I did know someone who once said that anything less than 7 emails is not harassment. They were specifically talking about pitching to editors, but you know, that's just my personal rule. You have to figure out what your boundary is. So I go for a 3.
Good rule, like that. 3 or 7. Right, and then Sam's basically asked if you've got an example regarding a story that you worked on that was inspired from either a press release or a newspaper piece.
I did an investigative story at uni. It hasn't gone anywhere further, but it was about GHB, I think, GBL, like the drug. It's a drug, and I was inspired to like build on that investigation by a BuzzFeed investigation 3 years prior. So the BuzzFeed investigation was in 2018, and I just found it really interesting. And then I was like, oh, I wonder like what has happened now with it. I wonder if like, you know, is there a higher rate now? At the time they were saying that hospitals were testing for it, and I was like, are they still testing for it? And I just had a look at it, and then I found out that actually the hospitals weren't testing for it anymore, but there were like a higher rate of anecdotal evidence of like the deaths, basically. So that was kind of inspired from a newspaper piece. Press release, not so much, but that's because I don't really read press releases that much. But yeah, so it is really interesting. I have a lot of friends who've like gotten a lot of stories out of newspaper pieces though, but that's the one off the top of my head for me.
And then I've got last one, just mindful of time now as well. This is from Matthew Bird, who says, how far into the investigative process do you pitch? Too early and the story might fall apart when you investigate further, but then too late and you might have put lots of time into something that doesn't get published. So
yeah,
how far into the process would you pitch?
Great question. So I personally, I would pitch after I have received FOIs, if your story requires FOIs, because I just like being like prepared, and I don't like an editor coming back to me saying, okay, but what information do you have and where did you get it from and all of this, and then I don't have an answer for them because I'm like, oh, I'm waiting 3 weeks for the FOI to come back. I have my idea, I do a bit of research, I send my FOIs. After I get my FOIs back and I find that there is something there, that is when I pitch, and then I say, okay, I've got this information, blah, blah, blah. I will then speak to sources. I will speak to this person and this person, this person. I might not have spoken to them yet, but I will, or I'll find them. And that's what I usually say in a pitch. And so it's kind of this in-between ground of like, I haven't done the interviews, I haven't done the sources, I haven't done the right to replies, anything like that, but I have done the FOIs and the background research, because for me, FOIs is also background research. So I have all the data, and then all the interviews and things like that come later. And that's kind of the middle ground that I feel like is a great time to pitch, because yeah, interviews and stuff can come later. But also, I know we're mindful of time. If anyone has other questions that you think of later, feel free to message me on Twitter. I'm happy to answer them later. Don't be annoyed if I don't answer within like today, but I will answer them over the next week if you'd like to message me.
Oh, that is really useful as well.
I'll put my Twitter in the chat just now.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I suppose just to end on, just before I let everyone go as well, just a big thank you, Michele, for sharing all of that knowledge and information about investigative journalism from all of the group and panel here as well. Thanks very much. And just a quick note for everyone, just for our 1 o'clock sessions as well. So in room 1, we've got freelancing as a student with Bethany Dawson and Gabby Willis. In room 2, we've got our publication swap shop, where you can come and show some of the best work this year and learn from some of the fellow members. And then in room 3, which I'm switching over to in a second as well, is social media journalism with Chandni Sembi, Cassie Cho, and El Rudd as well. So yeah, keeping busy. But thanks very much to everyone that joined us for this session. And again, just to end on a big thank you to you as well, Michele. Much appreciated.
Guys, I hope it was helpful. Like I said, message me on Twitter if you have any more questions or if you have ideas. And please have fun, because honestly, I miss Spank so much. Publication Swap Shop was my fave. And Bethany Dawson and Chadney are amazing journalists. So go forth, enjoy. Have a good day, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.